If you like this video, consider supporting the channel on Patreon, link in the description below.
JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is a manga series created by Hirohiko Araki that has been running since 1987. The manga would eventually see a proper anime series adaptation in 2012 from the studio David Production, who have been handling the JoJo anime since then. Before that series, however, there was a 13-episode OVA based on specifically Part 3 Stardust Crusaders. This was done by APPP. Surprisingly, this actually isn't the only pre-David Production JoJo anime to exist, as a movie based on Part 1 Phantom Blood was released in 2007 to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Phantom Blood. There's also evidence to suggest that there was going to be a movie based on Part 2 Battle Tendency, but that never happened. The only other JoJo movie that I'm aware exists is the 2017 live-action film based on Part 4 Diamond is Unbreakable, which I personally thought was an alright movie. But the fact that it'll more than likely never receive a sequel is unfortunate given that it didn't cover all of that part. I bring all this up to make a point that since its start in '87, JoJo has been no stranger to adaptations, and video games are definitely no exception. Now, up until the PS2, all of the games were based on Stardust Crusaders specifically. The RPG on the Super Famicom and the Capcom fighting game Heritage for the Future are two examples of this case. Now, when we get to the PlayStation 2, however, that console would only receive 2 JoJo games, and neither would be based on Stardust Crusaders. One would be an action game produced by Capcom, and the other would be an action game produced by Bandai and developed by Anchor Inc. Today, I have an interest in looking at both of these games, and will not be holding back on spoilers at all, both for these games and JoJo as most of a whole. Essentially, this video will more than likely contain spoilers for Phantom Blood, Battle Tendency, Stardust Crusaders, Diamond is Unbreakable, and Vento Aureo. The spoilers will mostly pertain to Phantom Blood and Vento Aureo, but I wouldn't put it past me if I accidentally spoil anything from the parts between them. I'm saying this genuinely. Please, read or watch JoJo. It's one of the best things I've ever experienced, and you won't regret it. Like, hiya! Fuck! Oops. Has it been, long enough that you can totes swear? Or is it still a no-no right now? What the fuck are you on about? Whoopsie. You did it again, you silly goose. Emily. What are you doing down here? Well, Mistress is, doing her totally fetch video stuffs right now, so I decided to, do what I always do. Get lost wandering a castle you've lived in for years? I think about 100 years ago? Maybe. God, math is so my weak point. Shit, that long? Totally. Deadass, you're both that old. Nope. Mistress is so much older than me, but don't tell her I said that. Do you know how much older? Or do you not remember? I think about 42 years older than me? Huh. So she's actually older than me. By a lot. A lot. Wait, so why does she keep saying she's my age in her videos? Well, duh! She doesn't want peeps thinking she's old or whatevs. So, you're both about my age physically then? Sorta. She was totally 42 when she became a sexy hot vampire babe, so when we split into 2 peeps, her age was halved. So, we're both forever 21. Huh. Alright then, you guys are both physically younger than me. That's not confusing at all.
Emily, quit lore dumping on the poor girl.
But it's fun.
Emily, go find Babs. I'm sure she'd love to hear it.
Okie dokie. You're Akila, right? I'm still learning names.
That's me. You must be humbled by my appearance.
Yeah, a little, I guess. I mean, you are kind of hot. Not important. Why'd you interrupt?
I need assistance. And since Calvin is away with his father doing some father-son nonsense, you were the logical next pick.
Why me?
Barbara's far too sensitive. I need someone I can trust.
Okay. What with?
You need to know this is of the utmost importance.
Shit, that important?
World-shattering.
No, you just got me anxious. What is it?
I need help deciding which pair of heels to buy online.
Oh,
What? Can't you tell how soul-crushingly crucial a decision like this is?
I mean, sure. I mean, I like heels too, but I don't know. You made it sound way more important.
We're wasting time.
Alright. Let's just get this done.
Fighting gold with courage deep in our hearts. The ones who stand and fight will be the ones who seize the night. I will fight until my life breaks apart. The gods above can't stop me. I'll show you what I can be. We'll take the world and laugh at destiny. Fighting gold.
JoJo's Kiyama no Boken, Ogen no Kaze, aka JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Vento Aureo, aka JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Win, aka JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, but the JoJo is spelled like Geo, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be pronounced as JoJo, is a 2002 game from Capcom made for the PlayStation 2. It only released in Japan and never saw an overseas release, although the game was, at one point, planned to have an overseas release, but that was cancelled. This overseas release wasn't just an idea that was then cancelled. No, they actually showed off a trailer for the game at E3 2002. It was just a sizzle reel of gameplay, and the logo they show is actually the logo for Heritage of the Future's US release, because that became the de facto English logo around this time. And we all know damn well that if this game had been localized, we would have seen a full English dub for the game. And since it was 2002, we all know that Johnny Young Bosch and Yuri Lowenthal would have been in it.
Why are you even telling us this stupid story in the first place?
You know, come to think of it, wasn't it always your dream to become Hokage someday?
But alas, it wasn't meant to be, and the game would remain undubbed and untranslated for years, until fans picked it up, and it was fully translated into English for fans to enjoy, which is how I'm playing it now. It's also what you're seeing on screen this whole time. In trying to find a credit for this translation, all I could find was a channel called JoJo's Wacky Trip, who had several videos leading up to the release of their patch. If this is the same patch, then that means this game's English patch finally happened in 2018. I'll link that channel in the description, by the way, so you can check out their videos. But with all that out of the way, let's get into the game itself and talk about it. To start, I love how this game looks. It goes for the cel-shaded style that games around this era like Jet Set Radio Future, Beautiful Joe, and Scooby-Doo Unmasked utilize to great effect. JoJo as a series is a very visually striking franchise, so going this route allows for the vibrancy and style to pop. It's a good thing too, since these models and environments wouldn't look anywhere near as good without this particular style of shading. I'm really grateful they went with this instead of that waxy cartoon game look that Night of 100 Frights or Budokai 1 had. The story is the same as the manga it's based on, which makes a lot of sense, and it covers the entire story. Since the manga had ended in 1999 and this game came out in 2002, it was very recent. Some small details are skipped over, like when Giorno is first given the flame trial by Pulpo and has to hide the lighter from the security guards as he leaves the prison. That's just completely glossed over. But for the most part, it does a really good job at adapting the narrative of Vento Aureo to a video game. Some scenes are even fully animated, in engine of course, while others are presented in a comic book style befitting of a manga game like this. The setup is simple. The story follows Giorno Giovanna, a hopeful boy with a dream, and this game shows the story of him achieving that dream. He joins the Mafia, becomes part of Bruno Bucciarati's gang, and fights great foes and overcomes great obstacles to achieve his dream of becoming a gangstar. I mentioned earlier how the cutscenes were handled, and personally, I like this approach. It's not perfect, and it does sort of skip over some sections, but every necessary detail of the story is here and accounted for. It's not like the narration storybook stuff from the Harry Potter games on the PS1, where it felt like they were consistently just flipping through pages and reading the spark notes. No, you get a solid idea of this story and can follow it along, and I appreciate the fact that it chooses to fill you in pretty well. My biggest issues, in terms of story stuff that they removed, are things like the fact that Doppio's fight against Risotto is just completely skipped over. The gang now just finds him dead on a rock and we never see that fight. And I personally think that could have been a really neat level. The fact that Koichi's involvement in the story is entirely skipped over and not mentioned. Meanwhile, Leaky Eye Luca's part around that same period is just kind of glossed over so that the first level can be Bruno and Giorno's fight on the train. You know, the one where he licks the side of Giorno's face? You know the one. The biggest removal happens after Giorno defeats Black Sabbath, and then causes Pulpo to Persona 3 Fez himself. The game skips about 14 chapters of Golden Wind to cut straight to the gang meeting Trish. Which of course means you don't get to see that torture dance scene in beautiful PS2 graphics. That all said, overall I think the game does a pretty good job at telling this story and makes it so you never really truly feel lost. There's even a level of the game that isn't actually a level. It's actually labeled as a cinema, and it's literally just a bunch of cutscenes. And these cutscenes are for the part that, seriously, read or watch JoJo. I was not kidding about the spoilers. Waldo will even put a time card up in here in case you didn't hear this, because this next bit that I'm about to spoil is a character death. Waldo, put up the card. Yeah, right there. Okay.
Also, the fuck did you just call me?
Where was I? Oh, yeah. The cutscenes are dedicated to progressing the plot and giving Abakio's death the proper respect that it deserves, especially given how big of a moment it was in the original manga. Like I said, they did completely skip over Risotto's fight with Doppio, which is unfortunate. Yeah, again, I think it would have been a really cool level, and being able to play Doppio at least once would have been neat. But whatever. And now that I'm done with that, for you guys who are just joining us after hitting the time card, let's just pretend King Crimson used its power just now. You all know what it does, so that'll make sense. Now, to actually see this story unfold and to get to the end, you have to actually play it, because it's a video game. So let's talk about that gameplay. The game is a simple 3D action beat 'em up. You use the X and square buttons for attacks and use the left and right bumpers for stand stuff. The left one brings out your stand, which you can use to defend yourself as well as attack, much like in the series. Meanwhile, the right, when held down, charges a special move that you can use. You can press triangle to do character-specific moves, which is hilarious because I did not realize you could do this until the level where I'm Polnareff fighting Diavolo, which is near the end of the game. I just think that's funny. I'm pretty sure they told me it, and I just didn't notice it and went the whole game without ever knowing it. Now, I know it's essentially tradition for my videos at this point to reference Devil May Cry. For me, it's just a really easy frame of reference given how much I love those games, so I end up defaulting to it when I have to think of a comparison. Think like how Nitrorad consistently brings up Mario 64 whenever he talks about 3D platformers. And, you know, considering this game is a Capcom action game, similar to Devil May Cry, it seems this tradition of mine is more fitting here than ever before. Though, Vento Aureo isn't exactly like Devil May Cry, there are plenty of differences. Whereas Devil May Cry has thoughtful combat with plenty of mechanical depth befitting of the character action genre, Vento Aureo is admittedly more simple and less technical. Now, don't misunderstand me. The game is not a walk in the streets of Venice. No. This game actually asks for you to pay attention and to treat it with some form of respect. It's not easy. It's actually quite challenging, which isn't always a common thing in licensed games in general. Something I should mention is that every level is essentially a boss fight. You are given control of one of the main characters in Golden Wind's story. No, it's not always Giorno, and the game's better for it. You must use whatever character you're playing's abilities and skills to best your opponent. Every opponent feels unique from one another, from Giacchio's White Album requiring Mista to dodge swiftly and to fire when his back's turned, or Lucio's admittedly frustrating man in the mirror pulling Fugo and Abakio into the mirror world, where the left and right movement on your analog stick is switched. Also, speaking of switching, you have to consistently switch between your stand, who's in the real world, and your main character, who's in the mirror world, to fight against Lucio. The game isn't easy, as I previously mentioned, and can even be frustrating in places, like guarding the car from White Album, or the previously mentioned Man in the Mirror stage. The lowest point in the game, for me, is the stage where you play Trish, because she only gets one level in this game. The first section is a little too slow, but I get why, given the context. You have to slowly inch towards Giorno's brooch, which is currently turning into a hand. If you've never seen or read JoJo, this must sound really fucking weird to you. It's not gonna get any less weird, I promise. And I essentially, after failing this part several times, essentially just cheesed it. Here's the thing. What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to slowly inch Trish towards one of the chairs on either side and then punch it so that it activates the reclining feature. Once the reclining feature is activated, Notorious B.I.G. will be drawn to hitting the recliner and you can slowly inch past him. But you have a limited time frame, which is why there's multiple chairs so you can hit them whenever Notorious B.I.G. gets done beating the shit out of the chair you previously activated. The problem is if you fuck this up at all, Notorious B.I.G. will attack you, and because the knockback in this game is reminiscent of Castlevania, getting hit by this will screw you over. My suggestion, just time your dodges perfectly so you can just like never get hit by the thing. Because if you time your rolls just perfectly, Notorious B.I.G. won't be able to latch onto you and will continuously lunge at you and re-lunge at you. I learned that by watching speedruns of the game to try to get advice on what to do for this section because I was losing my patience. But I know it's doable. The second part of the level is after you awaken Spice Girl. It's actually really fun because you get the zig-a-zig all over the annoying little pest that just got done frustrating me. So like, that was cathartic. The third part is the only part of this game that I just hate. It is like, you know how in every PS2 game, especially like the really great ones, there's always a part of the game that's just awful and you never want to do, but you always have to because everything else about the game is fucking amazing. This is the worst part of the game. Notorious B.I.G. becomes this massive monster of flesh, and you have to push it back while surviving a 2-minute time limit. There are a few levels like this where you have to survive a time limit, not necessarily finish an objective before the time limit runs out. No, the time limits in this game almost always, except for one level that I can remember, are just survive the clock levels instead of, you know, this is how long you have to do it. Because if they were like that, they'd be giving me flashbacks to Hogwarts. The only time a time limit is something you need to beat is the time limit against Bruno in level 2, when you have to essentially find and beat the shit out of him before he escapes, which makes sense in plot. No overuse of time limits in this game, I promise. But the time limit isn't even what sucks about this level, because of what I previously explained. No. What sucks about this level is that Trish can only take so many hits as B.I.G. deals massive damage. You could use your stand to block, but that only goes so far before the stand breaks. And if the stand breaks, you're a sitting duck. Get ready to get stomped on and beaten like you're someone who just said an opinion on Twitter. And yeah, you could dodge it in theory, but dodging is easier said than done due to the small space you're stuck in, given you're on a plane at this particular moment, which makes this part even less fun and more frustrating. This is without a doubt the lowest point in the game, which, honestly, I kind of expected the lowest point in the game to be the mild annoyance that came with Man in the Mirror flipping left and right. The only other level I feel that matches Stage 8 in frustration is Stage 10, which is the next playable stage because Stage 9 is that cinema chapter I mentioned earlier. I should explain. So this stage is better than the last one with Trish, but that's only because only one phase in it is kind of frustrating. Unfortunately, that's the first phase. The second and third phases are solid. You fight Cioccolata and Secco respectively as Giorno and Bruno respectively within the second and third phases. The Cioccolata fight is as piss easy as the tea that Giorno drank that one time, since Giorno's stages are by far the easiest in this game without a doubt. At least I think so. Meanwhile, Secco's fight is a little harder, since he can go underground like Knuckles the Echidna and jump back out, all thanks to Oasis. But if you remember the manga, all you have to do is beat the shit out of some cars, and also there's a part where you need to like not move so that Secco comes out of the ground confused why he doesn't hear anything, and then you beat the shit out of him while he's confused. Again, you benefit from reading the manga. We'll get into that later. No. The frustrating part of this is phase 1 with Mista, as you're required to make your way up to the top of the stage. Sounds easy? Yeah, a lot of things sound easy. It's too bad it's not, because Secco is constantly popping out of nowhere to attack you. Meanwhile, Cioccolata's stand Green Day has its poison moss blasting American Idiot into Mista's ears, causing him to slow down and also melt into the ground. And thus, you become even more open and vulnerable to Secco's Wonderwall lunges, and unfortunately, these lunges can actually knock you down several stories if hit right because of the previous mentioned Castlevania knockback. Plus, Secco can pull Mista down through the ground and return him to a lower area. Once again, I had to find a speed run to watch because you need to know the route of this level. Otherwise, you're dying. This is a very trial and error section. I still consider stage 10 better than stage 8, only on the basis that 2/3 of stage 10 are actually fun, whereas only 1/3 of stage 8 is actually fun. By the way, if you do get knocked down to a lower area by Sekko, just let him beat the shit out of you and reset the level, because it's significantly less frustrating than trying in vain to recover. If you're on emulator, which, let's be real here, 90% of you are, given this game wasn't released outside of Japan, you can use save states to make the stage more bearable, but that isn't a really great fix, since, you know, that's an outside element making the stage easier. This all said, these 2 stages are the lowest points in the game, and more often than not, the game's just challenging, not frustrating. Although, I would be lying if I said there weren't more than a few stages that dip more of their chips into the frustration guacamole instead of the challenge queso. Anyway, at the end of every level, you get a grade which is determined both by how much health you have by the end, and if you unlocked any of the secret factors. Finding all of them reward you with the best output. Doing poorly in a stage will net you an E rank, and doing the best will land you an S rank, like in Devil May Cry or Sonic. And like those games, the N ranks motivate you to replay levels to try and achieve the better scores. I found it the easiest to get S ranks in Giorno levels, since almost all of his levels can best be described as beat the shit out of the other guy with the Muda Muda style. Ironically, the only challenging Giorno level is the last one, the final fight against Diavolo, which I thought would be the easiest, since this fight has you armed with Golden Experience Requiem, aka possibly the most overpowered stand in existence. I said possibly, which means there's room for another stand to be more overpowered, so quit writing your comment. These ranks do affect one other thing, by the way, another story mode, which is an extra mode unlocked upon beating the game that allows you to replay levels with any character regardless if they were actually there for that fight. This is good because, like I mentioned earlier, Trish only has 1 level, and she's not the only character like this. Abakio only has 1 level, Fugo only has 1 level, Narancia only has 1 level, and Polnareff only has 1 level. Mista gets a couple levels, Bruno and Giorno get the most levels. Yeah, most characters only got 1 level, so this is a nice addition because of the fact that it means you can play these characters more. So if you're a really big Abakio fan, then this is great for you. There is a catch. You can only play levels in another story mode if you got a B or higher in them, so you better get grinding those secret factors and trying not to lose too much health. Which means I should probably explain what secret factors actually are. Secret factors are rewards you get in levels for playing the fight like how it went in the manga, which again, like I said, rewards you for having previous knowledge, but it doesn't handicap you for not having previous knowledge, because you can make it through every level in this game without unlocking the secret factors, save for the levels where the only secret factor is the one that activates at the start. Those don't count. And I like these. Like I said, they reward you for already having familiarity with the source material, but they don't punish you if you're new. I should probably get on to talking about those playable characters. So basically, every member of the Bucciarati gang is playable. You got Giorno, you got Bruno, you got Narancia, you got Mista, Fugo, Abakio, Trish. You even have Polnareff at one point. Polnareff from Stardust Crusaders, because he's in this part, by the way. Apparently, Koichi was going to get a level 2, but that was cut. His model's still in the game, but he's just not here. Like, not even just not as a playable character. He's just not in the game, period. I mentioned that earlier, but I still think it's funny. Because he's in Vento Aureo. He's like the only Part 4 character in Vento Aureo. You think they'd remember him. Now, while looking at these characters, fans of the recent Golden Wind anime are probably looking at some of these models and wondering what's up with the colors. Well, the thing is, color palettes in JoJo have never actually been consistent. And Pink Giorno from the anime was only one of several possible colors for him. Same with most of these characters. You can actually see this with a lot of the characters. It's obvious with Mista, and even more so with Fugo. Personally, I believe Blue Suit Giorno is the best Giorno. I'm glad this game, as well as later games All-Star Battle and Eyes of Heaven, used the Blue Suit palette for him. I don't really like Pink Suit Giorno. Nothing against it, it's just not my go-to. I'm honestly surprised the anime didn't go with Blue Suit Giorno, since up until that point, it seemed like Blue Suit was the default. Anyway, that's a tangent. Let's get back on the game. This game isn't very long. The average runtime is about 7 hours, and outside of another story mode, this game doesn't have any extra content. No. Replay value for this game is 100% dependent on the idea that you will try for all S ranks by replaying levels, doing your best not to take that much damage, as well as find all those secret factors. Shouldn't come as a surprise, like I said, every level is essentially a boss fight with few exceptions, so there barely being any extra content seems pretty in line to me. I guess while I'm still here, I should probably also talk about the game's soundtrack, which you've been listening to this entire time in the background. It was composed by Mitsuhiko Takano, who also composed music for games like The Minish Cap and Mega Man Xtreme 2. Takano's probably most well known for Marvel vs. Capcom 2's soundtrack, including the iconic Player Select song, yes, you know the one. Yes, that one. I honestly really like this game's soundtrack. It leans towards the Italy sound, as I've come to call it, as it really radiates that romanticized vibe of Italy in a lot of the songs. They fit the scenes they're in really well, convey proper emotions, and they never clash with what's happening. The best example of the soundtrack elevating a moment in this game has to be during Polnareff's fight against Diavolo, because the song that plays is a remix of his character theme from Capcom's previous JoJo game, Heritage of the Future. I love this so fucking much. You have no fucking clue. The only part of this game that rivals this for me is during the final confrontation with Diavolo. This shot happens, showing the previous Joestars before Giorno behind him, representing the bloodline he carries and the legacy on his shoulders. And somehow, the PS2 game does this scene the best, because it's the only version of this scene to include Jonathan. I don't know why, but the fact that he isn't there by default is ridiculous. Both the manga and anime exclude him, despite the fact that he's the start of the Joestar legacy. Even ignoring that he's my favorite JoJo for a moment, it feels wrong for him not to be there, because he created this legacy. And I'm really glad the team at Capcom added him in. It's all the better for it. And on that note, I think I should wrap up. In the end, I think JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Vento Aureo for the PlayStation 2 is what I would consider a good game. No, it's not perfect, it's got a few frustrating parts here and there, plus it's very starved for content outside of the main game, but it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's fun to play, and it does a solid job at telling the story of Golden Wind, even with the omissions it does make. I see nothing wrong in a good, well-made game that's only a handful of hours long. And plus, now that the game has a fan translation and has had a fan translation since 2018, you can easily play it in English, no problem. As a fan of JoJo, I'm quite pleased with the game I played. No, it's not as technical as Devil May Cry or Kingdom Hearts, but it's still a fun game, even in its more annoying moments. Definitely check it out if you're a fan of JoJo and looking for a pretty solid afternoon game. Arrivederci, Golden Wind. I had quite a good time with you. I know I won't be saying the same for what came after, unfortunately.
OG, boy better know me. Beefing up with muscles that are mighty like a Broly. OP, force like Kenobi. I will never fall back. Tackle him so hard, he be looking like the All Black. Speedwagon, cause I overdrive. Breath dragging when he burns alive. Dio planning so my dog would die. Be like John Wick, so you won't survive. Striking like Big Ben the bells and burn up like Kelvin. Vampire hunter Van Helsing. Hammer the nails in fine intervention. Crash like a Zeppelin, there's no way to heaven. Used to be the same team, but we're not the same league. You know that your time is up right when you hear the main theme. Beating Dio before it became mainstream. JoJo, I created a legacy.
In 2006, Bandai, pre-Namco merger, would publish JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Phantom Blood for the PlayStation 2 to celebrate the 20th anniversary. This went alongside a 2007 movie based on that part from APPP Animation. The game is developed by Anchor Inc., who also made... Oh dear, that does not bode well. Okay. Phantom Blood is the first part of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and is actually my favorite part of the franchise, which I know is beyond not a popular opinion, like at all. Like to the point where I'm pretty sure everyone watching this is either surprised that I just said that, or are people that I know who already have heard me say this before, like Tom. Yes, Yes, you, Tom. This game was the first game Bandai would publish with the JoJo license after Capcom would lose that license. And well... I'm just gonna rip the band-aid off immediately. Phantom Blood for the PS2 sucks. I hate that that's the truth, but it's an unfortunate reality that I have to accept.
This game blows!
I can toss this game in the pile with Goblet of Fire and Mystery Mayhem for games I've talked about that suck. But this one is the most disappointing for me, somehow even more disappointing than Goblet of Fire, considering exactly the source material it's based on. Again, Phantom Blood is my favorite part, so I don't like the fact that the one game it has is bad. I should get the positives out of the way since there aren't many, but there still are some worth talking about. The game's visual style is good. Sorta. I'd like to put an asterisk next to that statement, and we'll come back to that later. I gotta stay positive for just a bit longer first. The game retains the cel-shaded style that Golden Wind had, and I still think it's the right call when it comes to making a JoJo game. Something I'm pretty sure Bandai agrees with me on, since future JoJo games from the company retain this shading style as well. I also appreciate how the game does try to emulate Araki's art style during Phantom Blood's publication. Again, this compliment has an asterisk next to it, and we'll get back to that. The only other compliment I have for the game, and the only one I have that doesn't come with an asterisk, is that this game, like Golden Wind, does a pretty good job trying to adapt the story of Phantom Blood. Like, it truly feels to me that Anchor Inc. wanted to retell the story of this arc, and while it isn't a perfect retelling, I appreciate it, especially as a fan of the part. Alright, that's where my kind words end, and now I need to start being a bitch. Let's start with the core of the game, which is the combat. And the combat, well, it's awful. For starters, you spend the beginning handful of chapters with a metaphorical hand tied behind your back, since Jonathan didn't obtain the ability to use Hamon until after he met Zeppeli. And let me tell you, basic bruiser Jonathan is not fun to play at all. Some buttons are the same from Golden Wind, oddly enough. Specifically, square is an attack button, as is triangle. Plus the left bumper is Jonathan's guard, which reflects how that button summoned your stand in Golden Wind, which was the only way you could guard in that game. Plus circle is the dodge roll, just like how it was in Golden Wind. But circle seems to be a common button to assign dodge roll to if Kingdom Hearts has told me anything. Unlike Golden Wind, I don't think this game is good. Golden Wind had a fixed camera, which worked for that game really well. But Phantom Blood has a free camera that you can control with the right stick, and that's where my first issue comes in. That being the fact this game has no form of lock-on. The closest you have is hitting guard, which rubber bands the camera behind the back of Jonathan, and you can then use the right stick to aim him towards your target. Unfortunately, you'll be doing this a lot. And I mean a lot, given how heavy and awkward characters feel in this game. The fact this game doesn't have a lock-on despite its free camera is weird to me. It's a 2006 release. This is a post-Ocarina of Time, post-Kingdom Hearts, post-Devil May Cry release, and yet it feels more dated than all of those. Now, Golden Wind didn't have a hard lock-on. That being the kind seen in games like Ocarina of Time or Kingdom Hearts, where you hit a button and then a reticle hard locks you onto an enemy. However, it did have a soft lock-on. Whenever you summon your stand, it would focus your aim on the enemy in the area, similar to how guns in Devil May Cry work when you aren't actively locked onto an enemy. Phantom Blood doesn't have anything like that. So have fun hitting guard and turning to face your opponent, because if you don't, you're gonna lose track of them all the time. And you probably get hit by something you couldn't see coming because of how bad the camera is in this game. The first 2 fights in this game, you're expected to lose, by the way. You can win them, but I don't suggest bothering since the alternate cutscenes barely change anything. 12-year-old Jonathan still gets his shit kicked in by the bullies regardless. And yes, he is supposed to be 12 during this moment, despite looking like that. Like, yeah, the manga didn't actually have him looking convincingly 12 either, and even DP's 2012 anime made him look 17 or 18 at most. But at least there you can tell he's meant to be significantly younger than his post-time skip 20-year-old self, unlike in this game where they look basically the same age. The first fight you need to win is against Dio after he forces Arena to kiss him. A moment meant to further push Dio as the pure evil bastard that he is. Now, Jonathan is fighting for Arena's honor like the noble gentleman that he is. I struggled with this fight for a bit before eventually lucking out and winning. This led to the next fight, which is another Dio fight. This time, 8 years in the future, with both him and Jonathan now 20 years old. This time, Jonathan is fighting because Dio is slipping George poison and Jonathan isn't having any of that shit. My best advice for this fight, don't play this with any form of sense or thought. Just throw away blocking. Don't think about blocking. Bum rush the fuck out of Dio. Give him the old 1-2, because if you let up, you're not just wasting your time. You're wasting his time, my time, Emily's time, Calvin's time, the other me's time, Barbara's time, Akila's time, Waldo's time, everyone's time. Oh, by the way, speaking of time, these Dio fights also are the introduction to something I do not understand being in this game at all. That being time limits. Those of you from the Harry Potter video will remember this classic. You have to beat Dio before the clock runs out. But neither of these fights have a reason for there to be a time limit. Like, the boxing match would have made sense, but these aren't boxing matches. These are street fights, or I guess, foyer fights. Anyway, these time limits have no reason to exist. Dead ass. It's just Phantom Blood deciding to take a page out of the PS1 Harry Potter game's book of design for whatever reason. These time limits show up a lot in this game. The following fight is against Speedwagon and his 2 minions that we never saw again after Speedwagon went from heel to face, and it also has a time limit. This particular fight is 1 versus 3 before you've even unlocked half of Jonathan's moveset, and it expects you to win. So of course this fight is torture. I can't think of a solid strategy here, since trying to single each of them out would only waste time since, once again, like I mentioned, time limit right there. But you can't exactly stun lock them all together, since they will fall once your combo ends, and unless your timing is pixel perfect, you will not be able to hit them again when they get back up. You've probably noticed that health bars have green meters and red meters under them. Those red meters can revert back to green meters if left untouched, both for you and your opponents. And this shit makes the time limit make even less sense, especially in early game. You're essentially discouraged from taking your time and thinking out your fights, and instead are encouraged to throw caution to the wind and bum rush everything. This issue does somewhat disappear after you unlock the rest of your moveset, but these early stages are brutal. I'd honestly call them the worst part of the game, but I feel like that every level, honestly. After defeating Speedwagon's crew, the next level is against Dio and 2 zombies. You can't defeat Dio here, so ignore him like he's a Sanzaru game in a well-established series that they previously had no involvement in and should never have had any involvement with its sequel at all, and instead deal with the zombies. Oh, by the way, remember the health thing I mentioned? Well, undead enemies require you to beat down both their green and red health bars. After this, you fight Dio on the roof of the Joestar Manor as it burns down, which, hilariously, is the first time a fight in this game having a time limit makes any form of sense. This fight's not any harder than the previous Dio fights, but he does heal himself here. That's a non-issue if you can get him up to a wall and then keep a proper rhythm, which locks him into a flurry of punches like you're one of Jonathan's descendants punching the shit out of someone. It's only after this point in the game, after beating the shit out of Dio and sitting through hours of gameplay that is dominated mostly by awkward-looking cutscenes, do you finally unlock the other half of the combat, and it's all thanks to one Chad. William Antonio Zeppeli!
Hey, baby!
Okay, so upon gaining Hamon, the game adds your heat meter and your stamina meter to the UI, which is why the health was that strange curve in the left top corner before. Stamina can be charged by posing, which, admittedly, I really like, as it adds not only an extra bit of tech to the game, but it's also a nice little reference to arguably one of the most iconic parts of the JoJo franchise. Unfortunately, it does not save the combat. Stamina allows you to use special ripple-based moves, meanwhile the heat meter can let you activate overdrive attacks when charged. I will say, the level they introduced these moves in, i.e. Chapter 8, actually shows promise. You unlock a parry, which happens when you dodge at just the right time, and both the posing tech alongside the new ripple-based attacks and the super move take the combat from dull to pretty promising on a mechanical level. And this level's actually kind of fun. Fortunately, it's not enough to save the game from being bad, but at least it's not complete garbage. Now wait, no, it's only fun for 2 levels, and then the game fucks it up again. Okay, good to know that I should never have hope in you ever. So after a really fun chapter where you get to be Zeppeli, which I would like to point out is the most fun I had in this game, where you as Zeppeli fight Jack the Ripper, you are then forced to do the part of the manga where Jonathan went up against Jack, but it's turned into this super annoying section where Jack is running around with this metal torture device. You're supposed to use the wine glass in the bottom right corner, charging your stamina to create ripples in the liquid that show where Jack is. I like this in concept, as it does reference something that happens in the manga. But due to the game's poor camera, mixed with Jack being way faster than Jonathan, plus the fact you apparently can't guard his jumping lunges, while also keeping in mind that this is another level with a damn time limit for no reason, which, again, no idea why, especially since this level 100% feels like it's designed with the idea that you should take your time and goad out your target. But apparently not, because Phantom Blood for the PS2 can't do anything right, apparently. And all of this leads to a section so frustrating that the goodwill I was starting to form for this game, after suffering through 7 levels of irritating bullshit, evaporated in one fell swoop. And look, I get why it takes so long to get these moves, but your moveset feels so incomplete without it all. It's like playing that now delisted Legend of Korra game, where the combat feels so empty and barren until you get all of her bending back, and then it actually becomes fun to play, but that's at the end of the game, so you can't actually enjoy the game until you replay it. But this is on a smaller scale, since the Legend of Korra game did that throughout its entire run, but I'd argue it's more frustrating. I would continue on to every other level, but I honestly can't be bothered. This game takes 7 levels to even give you a competent move pool, and then decides it isn't content in just being a fun mid-tier action game, so it needs to stuff itself full of gimmick levels that make the game worse. Because now that the combat's halfway decent, they have to find a new way to make this game blow. The game teased me with the idea of having fun in chapters 8 and 9, but apparently it couldn't last, and eventually had to return to being an awkward, unfun, clunky mess of a game that just hurts to play. It takes so long and is so frustrating to get to the point where you actually unlock the rest of your moveset, and then it also continues to brick wall you, and people don't have time for that. Like, if this was a fun game to play, then the challenge would be welcome. I'd love to engage in the mechanics and try to, get better at the game. But the game's not fun to play, so it's just frustrating, and I don't enjoy it. So yeah, this game is just like Mystery Mayhem. There's promise in the concept for the game, and it seems promising at one point, but that promise quickly disappears as I continue through the game, and I'm exposed to more and more of what this game actually is. The game has other modes besides the story mode. There's 77 mode, which is a survival mode where you gotta take out 77 opponents. It's based on the 77 ring challenge from the manga. There's also an extra battle mode, which allows you to play new fights that weren't in the main story. There's no free battle though. These are alternate fights that are all preset, so you can't have fun by having whatever characters you want fighting whoever you want. The final extra mode is Dio mode. This lets you re-experience the game as Dio. The levels are basically the same, but it's been given a new context, like the first fight against the bullies now being recontextualized as to show why they follow Dio later on. But there are no cutscenes in this mode, so it's not as cool as it could have been. So, the music. It's also worse than Golden Wind, because this game seems dedicated to just being worse than a game made 4 years prior. Golden Wind's music felt fitting for the part it was adapting, and were great tracks on their own. Phantom Blood's game got music that is super generic sounding. Maybe I'm just spoiled given the 2012 anime had such a perfect OST that beautifully fit the arc, complete with a character track that told you everything about Jonathan's story in one song with no words. But this game just pales in comparison to that. Oh, remember when I said my kindness towards the game's visuals came with an asterisk? That's because despite the efforts to replicate Araki's style from Phantom Blood's era, the game itself doesn't really look all that good. The cutscenes are presented in 2 ways. Animated cutscenes with awkward and uncomfortable movement that lack weight, and definitely don't do the pages they're trying to adapt any form of justice, and comic panel cutscenes that try to recreate panels and poses from the manga with these character models that just look so stiff and bad. And the cutscenes are a lot of this game's runtime. Like, even the wiki says that this game is heavily composed of cutscenes, and it's not lying, which is why the cutscenes being awkward and ugly in places is such an issue to me, because so much of the game's runtime is dedicated to these scenes. I mean, I appreciate what they're trying to do here. That's why I tried to give it some form of kindness earlier. I appreciate this fact that it's stuck to cell shading. I appreciate the fact that they tried to replicate the way that this arc of the manga looked. But it just doesn't translate well, and I can't ignore that. I guess some of these cutscenes could be really funny to watch if you and some friends get stoned or drunk or whatever, but it's just not the same as experiencing Phantom Blood proper. Speaking of visuals, let's compare these two once again. Golden Wind's game was colorful and vibrant, while Phantom Blood's is more dull and drab with its colors. This wouldn't be a bad thing on its own, especially since Phantom Blood is a darker, more moody part of JoJo, especially when compared to Golden Wind. Visually, anyway. But it doesn't really achieve any of the tone that the manga was going for at all, even though it's clear that they did try to do exactly that. It just all looks dull and not all that good, and pales in comparison to how the previous game looked, at least to me. This is no way to experience Phantom Blood. Neither as a fan, and definitely not as a newcomer. This game didn't make pre-Hamon Jonathan fun to play, but even once I got Hamon, and the combat does become decent, they find new ways to annoy me each level. Did I mention the game has no difficulty options? Nope, no difficulty options whatsoever. That wonderfully nice, simple feature that the previous game had, just gone. It's not here. So if you find yourself frustrated, then you either gotta do the sensible thing and throw this game in the trash, so you can actually go off and play good games, or keep trying over and over and over again until eventually you just barely make it through. I don't see any point in going on about this game, especially since I both don't like it, and it genuinely makes me angry with how frustrating it is. So, I'm done. I'm done with this game, and I have no intentions of ever picking it up again. So I guess this second part isn't really a review, and it's more of a my thoughts on this game I don't like, which I guess is still a review. Damn it. What a waste of a JoJo game, made especially worse by the fact that this game is the last time any part of JoJo would get a dedicated game. After this, the next game in the JoJo series of games will be 2013's All-Star Battle, which was a crossover arena fighter. And since then, every JoJo game has been a crossover in some form or another, whether that means fighting games like Eyes of Heaven, mobile games like Diamond Records, or even an arcade battle royale like Last Survivor. This means only Phantom Blood, Golden Wind, and Stardust Crusaders would ever receive games based exclusively on their parts. Battle Tendency, Diamond is Unbreakable, Stone Ocean, Steel Ball Run, and JoJolion have never had video games to call their own. And since the current holders to the franchise's game rights are still Namco Bandai, I don't imagine we'll ever see games based on individual parts, since they typically stick to arena fighters when it comes to the anime games they produce these days. So today, I played 2 JoJo games. One was a pleasant surprise that left me wanting to play it again, even in its more frustrating moments. And the other was so frustrating that I never want to look in its general direction ever again. Both of these games are based on my 2 favorite parts of JoJo. Phantom Blood might have had more playable characters, even some more modes, but Golden Wind was more focused, more fun. It doesn't matter how many characters or how many modes you shove into a game, because if the game itself isn't fun in its core, it's worthless. And that's disappointing to me. I don't want to end this negatively, especially about Phantom Blood, my favorite part. So I'll say this, I love JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, from part 1 all the way to part 8. I imagine I'm going to love part 9 too. It's one of my favorite manga franchises, right up there with Beastars and Fullmetal Alchemist. I love all of it, and I would recommend everyone who is watching this to pick up the manga or start up the anime to follow Jonathan, Joseph, Jotaro, Josuke, Giorno, Jolene, Johnny, and Josuke on their bizarre adventure. It's something special, and I feel like honestly there isn't anything else like it. I might one day cover some of the other games in this franchise. Stuff like Eyes of Heaven, All-Star Battle, maybe even the SNES RPG based on Stardust Crusaders. But I made this video to focus on the PS2 outings, as I've looked at these games from afar for years. I'm still glad I finally got to play them, even if only one of them was good, because it means I can finally close that particular chapter of my life. And hey, at least Golden Wind was good. That's something.
Love you too, Dad.
I looked beyond all the fires city night sky, spring flower, summer looks ever out of the law, poison.
Today was a good day.
Calvin, you're back.
Yeah, Dad's back in the basement. How have things been here?
I don't know. Been here all day reading.
Sounds nice.
What were you and your father doing?
Oh, typical father-son stuff. Just driving a seaside village insane.
How nice.
I brought food and set it down in the kitchen before coming to get you.
Lovely.
What the Lovecraft?
Oh, something wrong?
The food! It's gone!
Dove.
This was a great idea, human. Yeah, I thought so. You know, usually when I make off with the food, I hide it, but today I was feeling a bit generous. Wonderful. So, wanna watch Phantom Blood? It just so happens to be my favorite part. Mine too! Great! I guess we do have some things in common. Tell me, do you want to watch the 2007 movie or the 2012 anime series? Good one, good one. You and I both know that movie's lost. No, what are you talking about? APPP released it on DVD back in 2007 just like they planned. Right, alternate dimension. Figures. Should have expected there'd be more differences outside of all of this. Hey! Don't push it. Look, I even have the Blu-ray release from 2019. Much better quality. Honestly, Blu-ray is superior to DVD in every way. Sure. Hey, by the way, did they forget your straw too? They forgot mine.